She was shaking, barely conscious, when I got the call. My daughter, 15 years old and diabetic, had been detained by police because a neighbor said she looked suspicious. What they didn't know was that her blood sugar was crashing fast, and her insulin pump had been left behind when she was handcuffed and taken from our front lawn. When I arrived, sirens flashing and adrenaline roaring in my ears, I found her slumped in the back of a patrol car, lips pale, eyes unfocused, barely able to whisper my name. Daddy, the arresting officer looked nervous. He hadn't even checked her medical ID. But Karen stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, smiling like she'd just done her patriotic duty. She said my daughter had been wandering, that she refused to identify herself, and that she made her uncomfortable. My fists clenched. My voice stayed calm, because that was the moment I knew. Karen had no idea who she had just crossed. She thought I was just another quiet parent on the block, another name on her HOA watch list. But I'm not just a father. I'm a federal judge. And what she did today wasn't just wrong. It was criminal. And now, she wasn't going to be judged by her rules. She was going to be judged by the law. We moved into the neighborhood thinking we'd found peace. It was the kind of suburban community people dream about: clean sidewalks, neatly mowed lawns, flags fluttering on porches, and a welcome packet from the HOA waiting before our first box even hit the doorstep. To most people, it was the picture of stability. To me, it was supposed to be safety, a quiet corner of the world where my daughter could feel normal, where her diabetes wouldn't make her different, where she could walk outside without fear, breathe without being watched, just be a kid. Her name is Lily. She's 15, smart beyond her years, and stronger than most adults I know. Type 1 diabetes has been a part of her life since she was 7. She wears an insulin pump clipped to her waistband, a CGM sensor on her arm, and carries a small crossbody bag with emergency sugar tablets, a glucagon pen, and her medical ID. We've practiced worst-case scenarios more times than I can count. What to do if her blood sugar drops, how to speak clearly to strangers if she needs help, how to stay calm even when her body is in chaos. She's brave in a way no child should ever have to be. I'm a federal judge, but I never lead with that. I've always believed in blending in. I keep to myself, I rake my leaves, I attend HOA meetings quietly, and I mind my business. I'd hoped that would be enough here. That I could just be Lily's dad to the neighbors, nothing more. That was before I met Karen. Karen introduced herself the same day we moved in. Blonde bob, pastel sweater, manicured smile, and a clipboard. Always the clipboard. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped. "I'm Karen Whitmore, HOA president. We're so happy to have you here. I just wanted to personally drop off a copy of our community standards and share a few gentle reminders." She handed me a packet the size of a small novel and pointed out highlighted sections as if she'd memorized every line. I nodded, smiled, thanked her. At the time, I thought she was just a little too enthusiastic, over-involved. The kind of neighbor who reminds you when your trash bins are visible from the street. Annoying, sure, but harmless. For a while, things were fine. Lily adjusted well. She loved the walking trail that wrapped around the neighborhood's central lake. Every afternoon after school, she'd go out for some air and movement, doctor's orders to help regulate her blood sugar. She always wore her medical ID, always had her phone, always followed the plan. I watched from the porch most days, letting her build independence under a watchful eye. Other neighbors would wave. Some stopped to chat. A few kids joined her on walks from time to time, but Karen watched too. Not like a neighbor, like a warden. At first, it was subtle. She'd happen to be outside whenever Lily was. She'd ask me seemingly innocent questions. "Is Lily okay out there alone?" Or, "Have you thought about getting her a service dog?" I brushed it off. I dealt with worse. I knew when to pick my battles. But then came the first friendly notice. It was taped to our door. A printed letter with HOA letterhead that said Lily's medical bag might violate visible accessory rules, that her medical devices could make other residents uncomfortable or curious. It was phrased as a consideration, not a violation, but the message was clear. Karen didn't like what she couldn't control. And Lily's visible difference? That made Karen uncomfortable. I didn't respond. Instead, I reviewed the HOA bylaws. There was no rule against medical items, and even if there were, federal disability law would supersede it. Still, I didn't escalate. I didn't want to make things harder for Lily. I wanted her to have a normal life. A boring one, if possible. But the signs kept coming. Karen began checking in when Lily sat by the park fountain. She once followed her on a walk around the lake and later emailed the HOA board saying she was concerned about a teenager wandering unsupervised with suspicious equipment. She started taking photos of Lily of our front yard of the emergency glucagon kit we kept in a clearly labeled box by the door, and she always had an excuse. Just documenting for safety, she'd say, or we've had vandalism lately. It was never her fault. It was always about the rules. And behind every smile was a threat. Lily never said much about Karen. She's used to people looking at her differently, but I noticed she stopped walking the loop as often. She sat closer to the house. She double-checked her bag every time she left, even though she's never once forgotten it. I asked her if anything had happened. She just watches me, Dad, like I'm doing something wrong. I knew then that peace was no longer an option. Karen wasn't just watching. She was waiting. It started with the bag, the small crossbody bag Lily carried everywhere, discreet black, worn with age, and holding her entire survival kit inside. Insulin pens, glucose tablets, her blood sugar meter, a medical card. It was functional, not fashionable. And yet, it was enough for Karen to find offense. One morning, we found a printed notice taped neatly to our mailbox. It read, "Residents are encouraged to maintain visual harmony by avoiding unsightly or unusual personal accessories in public spaces. Please ensure personal items do not cause alarm or confusion to others." There was no name, but it didn't need one. The language, the tone, the passive-aggressive undertone, it had Karen's fingerprints all over it. What kind of person looks at a medical bag and sees a visual disturbance? What kind of neighborhood breeds that kind of thinking? I took a picture of the letter and stored it in a growing folder labeled Incidents. I still hadn't used my position. I still hadn't revealed who I really was. But that day, I added a line to a document I'd quietly begun keeping. If anything ever happens to Lily, this is where it started. Karen didn't stop. The next week, she approached Lily directly, cornered her near the community garden under the guise of concern. I wasn't there. Lily told me about it later, trying to sound like it wasn't a big deal, but I could hear the anxiety in her voice. Karen had asked why she always carried that bag, and then worse, if she was really allowed to be walking around by herself like that. According to Lily, she didn't yell. She didn't even raise her voice. She just stood too close, spoke too calmly, asked questions like accusations. I told her I was fine, that I had everything I needed, Lily said, fiddling with the edge of her shirt. But she kept staring at my pump, Dad, like it made me dangerous. I filed a formal complaint with the HOA. I worded it carefully, professionally, and backed it with ADA language and medical documentation. The response? A templated email saying they take all concerns seriously and would remind residents to be respectful. That was it. No mention of Karen. No follow-up. Nothing. And then, just like that, the letters started, this time official, with HOA letterhead. One said our trash bins were visible from the street outside of collection hours. They weren't. Another cited excessive outdoor storage, referencing the small, labeled container on our porch that held emergency glucose kits. They even flagged our security camera, claiming it invaded communal privacy, even though it faced our own driveway. Every letter was cold, sterile, dressed in bureaucratic language and subtle threats. The fines were small. The pressure wasn't. Karen had weaponized the rulebook, and now she was coming at us with it page by page. Still, I didn't respond in kind. I documented every complaint, every encounter, every ignored email, until the day she went too far. It was late March. The weather had warmed, and Lily, who had been stuck inside all winter with tight glucose swings, finally had the energy to walk again. She asked if she could go to the neighborhood park, just a 5-minute walk down the road, within sight of several houses, including ours. I agreed, of course. She had her phone, her bag, her pump, everything. I watched her walk from the porch. A breeze carried her braid to one side. Her steps were light, confident. She was reclaiming something she hadn't had for months, her freedom. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't Lily. It was a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice said, "You need to come to the park. Now." I was out the door in seconds. When I arrived, I saw them before I heard anything. Karen was standing near the swing set, gesturing wildly. 2 HOA board members were with her. And across the grass, sitting on the bench with her knees drawn up and her bag clutched tightly, was Lily, pale, shaking, on the verge of tears. Karen saw me and immediately raised her voice, loud enough for the entire street to hear. She refused to leave when asked. "She's disturbing the other children." I walked straight to Lily, ignoring Karen, and kneeled beside her. "Are you okay?" She said I was scaring people. That I wasn't allowed to be here alone, Lily whispered. "I wasn't doing anything, Dad. I was just sitting." Her glucose meter was blinking red. A slow drop. Stress-induced, likely. Her body burning sugar faster than she could process. I stood slowly, turned to Karen, and said through clenched teeth, "What exactly is the problem?" Karen crossed her arms. "We've had complaints. She's wandering public property with unidentified medical gear. She looks unwell. People are uncomfortable. She has a federally protected medical condition," I said, "and this is not public property. It's shared community space, which we pay dues for, just like you." Karen smirked. "I'm just doing what's best for the neighborhood." That was when I realized this wasn't about discomfort. This was about control. She wanted Lily out. Period. Because her existence didn't fit the image Karen had curated for this neighborhood. And the worst part? She was now dragging others into it. The board members behind her said nothing. Just watched. Silent, complicit, afraid to challenge her. I helped Lily to her feet, walked her home, and treated the low. The next day, we got another letter. This time citing an unauthorized minor using common space without adult supervision. A thinly veiled threat. The day after that, a visit from Child Protective Services. Yes, Karen had reported me. Claimed that Lily was neglected, that she wandered the neighborhood alone, that she refused to disclose her medical condition to concerned citizens. The CPS agent was professional, kind even. She saw through the report almost instantly. But it didn't matter. Damage was done. Lily cried that night. Not because of the visit, but because she felt like it was her fault. Like her existence had become a problem no matter how careful she was. "I didn't do anything wrong, Dad. I swear." I hugged her tighter than I ever had before. "I know, sweetheart, and I'm going to fix this. I promise." But inside, I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was furious. Because now, Karen wasn't just making noise. She was making war. It started with the bag. The small crossbody bag Lily carried everywhere, discreet black, worn with age, and holding her entire survival kit inside. Insulin pens, glucose tablets, her blood sugar meter, a medical card. It was functional, not fashionable. And yet, it was enough for Karen to find offense. One morning, we found a printed notice taped neatly to our mailbox. It read, "Residents are encouraged to maintain visual harmony by avoiding unsightly or unusual personal accessories in public spaces. Please ensure personal items do not cause alarm or confusion to others." There was no name, but it didn't need one. The language, the tone, the passive-aggressive undertone, it had Karen's fingerprints all over it. What kind of person looks at a medical bag and sees a visual disturbance? What kind of neighborhood breeds that kind of thinking? I took a picture of the letter and stored it in a growing folder labeled Incidents. I still hadn't used my position. I still hadn't revealed who I really was. But that day, I added a line to a document I'd quietly begun keeping. If anything ever happens to Lily, this is where it started. Karen didn't stop. The next week, she approached Lily directly, cornered her near the community garden under the guise of concern. I wasn't there. Lily told me about it later, trying to sound like it wasn't a big deal, but I could hear the anxiety in her voice. Karen had asked why she always carried that bag, and then worse, if she was really allowed to be walking around by herself like that. According to Lily, she didn't yell. She didn't even raise her voice. She just stood too close, spoke too calmly, asked questions like accusations. I told her I was fine, that I had everything I needed, Lily said, fiddling with the edge of her shirt. But she kept staring at my pump, Dad, like it made me dangerous. I filed a formal complaint with the HOA. I worded it carefully, professionally, and backed it with ADA language and medical documentation. The response? A templated email saying they take all concerns seriously and would remind residents to be respectful. That was it. No mention of Karen. No follow-up. Nothing. And then, just like that, the letters started. This time, official, with HOA letterhead. One said our trash bins were visible from the street outside of collection hours. They weren't. Another cited excessive outdoor storage, referencing the small, labeled container on our porch that held emergency glucose kits. They even flagged our security camera, claiming it invaded communal privacy, even though it faced our own driveway. Every letter was cold, sterile, dressed in bureaucratic language and subtle threats. The fines were small. The pressure wasn't. Karen had weaponized the rulebook, and now she was coming at us with it page by page. Still, I didn't respond in kind. I documented every complaint, every encounter, every ignored email, until the day she went too far. It was late March. The weather had warmed, and Lily, who had been stuck inside all winter with tight glucose swings, finally had the energy to walk again. She asked if she could go to the neighborhood park, just a 5-minute walk down the road, within sight of several houses, including ours. I agreed, of course. She had her phone, her bag, her pump, everything. I watched her walk from the porch. A breeze carried her braid to one side. Her steps were light, confident. She was reclaiming something she hadn't had for months, her freedom. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Then my phone buzzed. It wasn't Lily. It was a number I didn't recognize. A woman's voice said, "You need to come to the park. Now." I was out the door in seconds. When I arrived, I saw them before I heard anything. Karen was standing near the swing set, gesturing wildly. 2 HOA board members were with her. And across the grass, sitting on the bench with her knees drawn up and her bag clutched tightly, was Lily, pale, shaking, on the verge of tears. Karen saw me and immediately raised her voice, loud enough for the entire street to hear. She refused to leave when asked. She's disturbing the other children. I walked straight to Lily, ignoring Karen, and kneeled beside her. "Are you okay?" She said I was scaring people. That I wasn't allowed to be here alone, Lily whispered. "I wasn't doing anything, Dad. I was just sitting." Her glucose meter was blinking red. A slow drop. Stress-induced, likely. Her body burning sugar faster than she could process. I stood slowly, turned to Karen, and said through clenched teeth, "What exactly is the problem?" Karen crossed her arms. "We've had complaints. She's wandering public property with unidentified medical gear. She looks unwell. People are uncomfortable. She has a federally protected medical condition," I said, "and this is not public property. It's shared community space, which we pay dues for, just like you." Karen smirked. "I'm just doing what's best for the neighborhood." That was when I realized this wasn't about discomfort. This was about control. She wanted Lily out. Period. Because her existence didn't fit the image Karen had curated for this neighborhood. And the worst part? She was now dragging others into it. The board members behind her said nothing. Just watched, silent, complicit, afraid to challenge her. I helped Lily to her feet, walked her home, and treated the low. The next day, we got another letter. This time citing an unauthorized minor using common space without adult supervision. A thinly veiled threat. The day after that, a visit from Child Protective Services. Yes, Karen had reported me. Claimed that Lily was neglected, that she wandered the neighborhood alone, that she refused to disclose her medical condition to concerned citizens. The CPS agent was professional, kind even. She saw through the report almost instantly. But it didn't matter. Damage was done. Lily cried that night, not because of the visit, but because she felt like it was her fault. Like her existence had become a problem no matter how careful she was. I didn't do anything wrong, Dad. I swear. I hugged her tighter than I ever had before. I know, sweetheart, and I'm going to fix this. I promise. But inside, I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was furious. Because now, Karen wasn't just making noise. She was making war. Let me know when you're ready for part 4. Conflict escalates 1,800 to 3,000 words, where Karen pushes the line with real danger and everything begins to unravel. You said, ####4 escalation 1,800 to 3,000 words, ***** Karen files formal HOA, complaints, harasses your daughter while you're at work, she begins photographing your house, leaves threatening notes, tries to call CPS anonymously right afore. Escalation 3,000 words, ChatGPT said. Certainly. Here's part 4. Escalation written in immersive paragraph form, continuing your emotionally gripping 50-minute story. This section brings the story's midpoint to life and builds the tension steadily toward the breaking point 1,300 words, concluding at approximate 3,000 total story words after the CPS visit. Something changed in me. I no longer gave Karen the benefit of the doubt. I no longer believed she was just a nosy neighbor obsessed with HOA policies. This was targeted, obsessive, dangerous, and it was escalating fast. Lily became more withdrawn. She no longer asked to go on walks. She hesitated to step onto the porch without checking over her shoulder. Her insulin levels, which we'd worked so hard to stabilize, began to fluctuate from stress. I adjusted her pump settings, refined her meal plans, scheduled extra visits with her endocrinologist, but there's no medical dosage for living under psychological siege. And that's exactly what Karen had created. It began with formal complaints, not the passive-aggressive notes anymore. These were official, filed directly with the HOA, signed with her full name. One claimed Lily had been seen tampering with neighborhood landscaping because she paused to rest her hand on a decorative hedge during a walk. Another insisted we had unauthorized medical storage equipment on our porch, our small, temperature-stable insulin container labeled in case of emergency. She even reported that we were filming neighbors without consent, referencing the basic security camera above our garage. One morning, I found her walking slowly past our house, phone raised, taking photos of Lily's sensor of our porch box, even of our trash bins. I stepped outside and called out, "Can I help you with something?" She didn't flinch. "I'm gathering evidence," she said calmly, lowering her phone with that same chilling smile, "for the safety of the community." That phrase rang in my ears for days. Safety of the community. To Karen, that meant homogeneity, silence, control. And we didn't fit that picture. She started harassing Lily when I wasn't home. Not physically, but through presence, surveillance, and subtle threats. When Lily went to grab the mail, Karen would appear at the end of the driveway, arms crossed. When she watered our front flower bed, Karen would emerge from behind her hedge, snapping photos and muttering to herself. Once Lily told me, she said I should keep my illness inside the house, that people don't need to see it. That night, I checked the footage from our camera. There she was, standing just feet from our lawn, staring for nearly 10 minutes, doing nothing, saying nothing, just watching. I started documenting everything with timestamps, voice memos, photos, screenshots, legal footnotes. I wasn't just building a file, I was building a case. And then came the notes. The first one was tucked under our doormat. "You're attracting the wrong kind of attention." The second was taped to Lily's bike. "She's not safe out here. You're not either." The third was slipped into our mailbox without a stamp and signed but unmistakable. "We don't want a lawsuit, but we will pursue compliance enforcement if this continues." I handed each one to the local police. They made a report, told me to let them know if it escalates. I asked what exactly counted as escalation. They didn't answer. Then, one day, I came home to find a folded letter in our screen door. No envelope, just a single page. Typed, "The neighborhood deserves peace. If you won't remove the threat, someone else will." The threat, of course, being my daughter. I had a restraining order filed the next morning. It wasn't easy. It required long documentation, photos, statements. I had to walk into a courtroom and, for the first time in my career, stand on the opposite side of the bench. Not as the judge, but as the victim. I wasn't wearing robes. I wasn't protected by authority. I was a father begging the system I served to protect my child. The temporary restraining order was granted. It didn't stop her. 3 days later, a strange man knocked on our door. Said he was just checking on the kid, that he'd heard she was having episodes in public. I asked who sent him. He mumbled something about a concerned community member. When I asked for ID, he ran. I called the police. Showed them the footage. Another report. Another shrug. "We'll keep an eye on the area." But I didn't need them to watch anymore. I was watching, and I was waiting, because I knew what was coming. She had used complaints. She had used shame. She had used surveillance, intimidation, and whispers. And now she had used outsiders. The next step, I already knew. She would try to use the law against me again. And that's exactly what she did. On a rainy Thursday morning, while I was in court hearing a federal disability discrimination case, I got a call from Lily's school nurse. She was crying. "She's okay," she said, "but the police were here." What happened? Someone called in a tip. Said Lily had brought suspicious medication to school. They thought she was carrying narcotics. It wasn't narcotics. It was insulin. An anonymous tip. An accusation that she was carrying drugs. Without any proof, any warrant, any understanding of what it meant to keep a child alive every day. The school had cooperated with the officers, but the nurse had stepped in before they could take her. She showed them Lily's chart, her prescriptions, her medical file. The officers apologized, but apologies don't erase trauma. When I picked her up, she didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just held my hand the whole ride home and whispered, "She won't stop, will she?" I looked in the rearview mirror at the strongest person I knew. "No," I said, "but I will." And that was the day I stopped holding back. Because this wasn't just neighborhood drama anymore. This was criminal. And the next move she made would be her last. It happened on a Friday afternoon, the kind of day that tricks you into thinking the worst is behind you. The sun was gentle, the air light with spring, and for the first time in weeks, Lily had smiled without hesitation. She asked if she could walk to the lake trail again, just for a few minutes. I hesitated. Every instinct in me was pulsing with warning. But I also knew that if I kept her locked in a house, if I let Karen's shadow dictate our movements, then Karen had already won. So I agreed, on the condition that she'd text me every 10 minutes and stay within range of the security tracker clipped to her bag. She nodded, kissed my cheek, and stepped into the light. She was gone only 15 minutes when the call came in. Unknown number. Local area code. The voice on the other end was tense. "Is this Lily's father?" "Yes." "This is Officer Torres with the County Sheriff's Department. Your daughter has been detained by patrol officers near the community trail. We need you to come down immediately." I stood still for a beat. Detained? Why? There was a report of a juvenile acting erratically in a public space, possibly under the influence. Officers responded. She became uncooperative. She's currently in a patrol car. I was already moving before the call ended. When I arrived, I saw 2 patrol cars parked near the trail entrance, red and blue lights, turning lazily under the bright afternoon sun. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors, dog walkers, kids on bikes. And then, my heart cracked open. I saw her, slumped in the back seat of the cruiser, head tilted, mouth parted, skin pale as paper. The door was shut. Her hands were cuffed in front of her, trembling weakly. I ran to the nearest officer. "That's my daughter. What the hell happened?" He turned to me, brows furrowed. "Sir, We received a 911 call about a teenager behaving aggressively and possibly impaired. She refused to answer questions or identify her medical condition. She was resisting commands. I stepped closer, fury rising. She's not impaired. She's diabetic. She's hypoglycemic. Look at her. She's crashing and you locked her in a car without even checking her ID? She didn't explain. She couldn't explain. I shoved past him and opened the door. Lily's body was limp, soaked in sweat. Her insulin pump read 49 milligrams per deciliter. Dangerously low. She wasn't uncooperative. She was fading. I reached into her bag, ripped open a glucose gel, and tilted her chin gently. Stay with me, baby. Come on. Come back to me. Behind me, I heard a familiar voice. I warned you. Karen, standing at the edge of the sidewalk, like she belonged there, phone still in hand. Her arms were crossed, her mouth tight, with victory. She was alone. She was scaring people. I had to do something. I turned toward her, barely containing the storm rising in my chest. You called the cops on a diabetic child having a medical episode? She refused to answer me. She was being evasive. I didn't know what she had on her. It could have been drugs for all I knew. It was insulin. I barked, insulin and sugar. You could have killed her. Karen's smile didn't break. If you were a responsible parent, maybe she wouldn't have been out there alone. And that was it. That was the moment. I stood up slowly, turned to the officers, who were now realizing just how badly they'd misread the situation, and I pulled out my wallet. I flipped open the black leather badge holder and spoke in a voice that no longer trembled. My name is Judge Alexander Cross of the United States District Court. You just unlawfully detained a minor with a federally recognized medical disability. You failed to identify her condition, denied her immediate medical access, and placed her at risk of death. And you, I pointed straight at Karen, just weaponized the legal system against a child for the second time. That makes you liable under both civil and federal law. You're not just an angry neighbor anymore, Karen. You're a criminal. Everything went still. The crowd fell silent. One of the officers took a step back. The younger one muttered something about protocol and not realizing. But I wasn't listening to them anymore. I was listening to Lily, her breathing beginning to steady, her body responding to the sugar. She blinked slowly, tears leaking from the corners of her eyes. Dad? I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. Karen stood frozen. For the first time, she looked unsure. Good. She should be, because for weeks she had played her little game, thinking she could outmaneuver us with printed letters and weaponized suspicion. But now the mask was off, and the gavel was in my hand. Karen's face went pale, not immediately, but gradually, like the slow dimming of a light when someone realizes they're no longer in control. She stared at the badge in my hand, her mouth slightly open, her voice caught between disbelief and denial. You're a judge, she said. I didn't answer her. Not directly. I turned to the officers first. One of them was visibly sweating now, his hand twitching near his belt, unsure whether to stand at ease or brace for impact. The younger one, Officer Torres, stepped forward cautiously, trying to piece things together. Sir, we had no idea. No one informed us. You don't need to be informed that a child in medical distress should receive treatment, not handcuffs. I said, sharp but even. You detained her without first checking for a medical ID, without assessing visible medical equipment, and without parental contact. I will be filing a full report with the sheriff's office and the Internal Conduct Division. I suggest you both start gathering your documentation. He swallowed hard. Understood, Your Honor. The tone shifted immediately. The crowd watched, suddenly hushed, the weight of the moment settling like fog. I could feel the neighbors recalibrating, their gazes drifting between Karen and me, realizing this wasn't just some HOA drama anymore. Karen took a step back. I was just trying to help. I thought she was a danger. She wouldn't talk to me. She wouldn't tell me what was wrong. She didn't owe you anything, I replied, eyes locked on hers. Not a smile. Not an explanation. Not her peace. You've stalked, harassed, photographed, reported, and now nearly endangered her life, all under the false banner of community safety. What you've done isn't help. It's persecution. Karen opened her mouth again, searching for an argument that didn't exist. I didn't know she was diabetic, you did? I said coldly. You were informed. Not once. Not twice. Multiple times. Through my formal HOA letters, through medical disclosures, through direct conversation. You knew, and you still acted with willful negligence. I stepped closer, not threatening, just immovable. Let me be clear, Karen. You just violated federal disability law. What you did constitutes discrimination under the Americans with Disabilities Act, Section 12132, which protects against the denial of public services or benefits on the basis of a disability. You also interfered with her access to emergency medical aid, which in this case may qualify as reckless endangerment of a minor. And because your actions involved falsified 911 reporting and a repeated pattern of targeted harassment, you may also be liable for civil rights violations under federal law. She shook her head slowly. But I didn't mean to. Intent doesn't negate consequence. You didn't need to mean it for it to be illegal. By now, the HOA board members who had stood idly by for so long were lingering near the curb. One of them, Russell, the only one who'd ever apologized, looked away when our eyes met. Karen's voice cracked. I didn't know who you were. That's the point, I said. You thought I was no one. Just a man. Just a parent. Just someone you could push, intimidate, manipulate. But I've spent 20 years judging character, facts, and motives. And believe me when I say, you are guilty of all three. She looked like she wanted to scream, to run. But there was nowhere to go, nowhere to hide. I turned back toward the cruiser, toward Lily, her color returning, her breathing normalizing. I reached in, unbuckled her gently, and held her close as I guided her out. The officers stepped aside instinctively. No one tried to argue anymore. Karen stood frozen, speechless. And then I did something unexpected. I spoke loudly, not just to her, but to everyone watching. Let this be a reminder. Titles don't make people powerful. Compassion does. And silence in the face of cruelty? That makes you complicit. My daughter almost died today because of ignorance, because of ego, because someone decided that difference was dangerous. Karen's knees looked weak, but I didn't care. She's going to be okay, I said, quieter now, eyes still locked on her. But you won't. Not after this. The law is coming for you. And this time, it won't be a newsletter. It'll be a courtroom. And with that, I walked Lily home, slowly, deliberately, her small hand in mine. We didn't look back. We didn't need to. The silence behind us said everything. Because for once, Karen had nothing left to say. The fallout began within 24 hours. It started quietly, an official incident report filed by Officer Torres, followed by an internal review requested by the sheriff's office. But beneath that calm surface, pressure was building. My formal statement, backed by years of legal experience and a meticulously documented record of Karen's harassment, went directly to the district attorney. I had no intention of letting this slip through cracks. 3 days later, Karen Whitmore, the once untouchable president of the HOA, was arrested. No more smug walks past our house. No more clipped letters taped to our mailbox. This time, she left her property not to inspect a hedge or snap a photo, but in handcuffs, escorted by 2 uniformed officers while the entire neighborhood watched from behind their blinds. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was justice. The charges were precise and devastating. Reckless endangerment of a minor false reporting to law enforcement violation of federal ADA regulations, civil rights harassment under Title II of the Civil Rights Act. It wasn't just the arrest that hit her. It was what came after. I filed a federal lawsuit on Lily's behalf for damages related to emotional trauma, unlawful detainment, and discriminatory harassment. And this time, I didn't hide behind my role as a father. I stood in court as both a legal authority and a parent of a child who'd suffered under the very system I had sworn to uphold. Karen's defense was weak, built on vague accusations, twisted interpretations of HOA policy, and the tired refrain of "I was just concerned." But the footage didn't lie. The letters didn't lie. The police report, medical documentation, and CPS case file, none of it could be erased. When the ADA compliance violations became part of the case file, advocacy organizations took notice. By the end of the week, a disability rights nonprofit had released a public statement. This is not just a neighborhood incident. It is a clear, systemic failure to protect the rights of children living with medical conditions. The story went national. Local news covered the arrest. Then a regional station picked up the story. Then the national networks followed. HOA president arrested after calling police on diabetic teen became a headline on every major platform. The video clip of Lily, handcuffed, pale, unconscious, was broadcast to millions. And suddenly, the entire nation was watching what had happened on our quiet street. The HOA board panicked. They called an emergency meeting, closed door at first, then forced open by community demand. For the first time, neighbors who'd once stayed silent stood up. Testimonies poured in. About Karen's years of bullying. About the letters. About how people were afraid to speak up because of fines, threats, or being ostracized. A retired schoolteacher said she was told not to encourage Lily's visibility. A mother admitted Karen had threatened to fine her for allowing her son to talk to the sick girl. A board member resigned mid-meeting, stating he could no longer be part of a culture of manufactured fear. Under community pressure and legal liability, the HOA board was forced to dissolve temporarily while investigators reviewed internal communications, email logs, and complaint records. And the neighborhood? It changed. People I hadn't spoken to in months came forward. They apologized, not just for staying silent, but for letting someone like Karen operate unchallenged for so long. One neighbor left a handwritten note on our doorstep. "I watched it happen, and I did nothing. I'm sorry." Another offered to repaint our fence. The couple across the street brought Lily a bouquet of wildflowers and a card signed by a dozen children in the neighborhood. But more than gestures, the culture shifted. People started smiling again, genuinely this time. They made space. They asked questions respectfully. Lily received an invitation to speak at her school's Disability Awareness Day. Her teachers rallied around her. Her classmates asked how insulin pumps worked instead of staring silently. And Lily? She held her head higher. She walked farther. She played music on the porch again. She was no longer just the girl with the bag or the illness. She was the girl who stood up and helped change something broken. And me? I finally allowed myself to feel it. Not just the anger, but the grief. The quiet pain of watching my daughter be treated like a threat. The ache of holding in every legal instinct so I wouldn't make it worse. And finally, the release. Because Karen didn't just lose her title, her reputation, or her freedom. She lost the illusion of power. And in her place, something better took root. Accountability, empathy, and most importantly, hope. Spring passed into summer quietly. No court dates, no hearings, no reporters outside the house. Just warmth, routine, and the sound of Lily's laughter echoing through the backyard again. Her recovery wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and in many ways more powerful. The bruises left by shame and fear don't fade as quickly as the ones you can see, but Lily? She didn't just survive what happened. She grew from it. I watched her confidence return piece by piece. She walked farther. She answered questions with clarity. She even started mentoring other students with chronic illnesses, explaining how to self-advocate, how to speak firmly, how to know when someone crosses the line, and how to speak up when they do. Her insulin pump beeped one afternoon while we were out in the garden, and a younger kid nearby asked, "What's that?" She answered with a grin and said, "It's just part of my superpowers." I turned away so she wouldn't see the tears in my eyes. Karen never returned to the neighborhood. After the lawsuit, the media fallout, and her charges, she quietly sold her home and disappeared. Her name became a warning, not a threat. Her legacy, reduced to a cautionary tale of what happens when prejudice, ego, and unchecked power fester in the places meant to feel safest. But this story was never about Karen. It was always about Lily and every child like her. Children who carry conditions the world doesn't understand, who are expected to explain themselves to strangers, who are punished for being different, who are told they're the problem when they're just trying to live. After everything, I was invited to speak at a parents' forum, something I never imagined doing. They asked me to talk not as a judge, but as a father who had seen the system fail his daughter, and then used that same system to make it right. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't need one. I stood on that stage, looked into the eyes of mothers and fathers who were terrified for their own kids, and I said, power isn't about wearing a robe or sitting on a bench. It's not about being a judge or a lawyer or an officer. Power is knowing when to use your voice and when to protect someone who can't fight alone. I paused, then looked down at the photo I kept in my jacket pocket. Lily, sitting under the tree she once feared, writing in her journal, free and fearless. Because sometimes being loud isn't what changes things. Sometimes it's standing quietly and refusing to move. That forum turned into a series. Schools asked me to come speak. Lily joined me once, and I'll never forget what she told a group of students. You don't have to be brave every day, just the day it matters. That's all it takes. One day, one moment, one choice. And when that moment comes, may we all choose courage. For our kids, for our neighbors, for the ones watching silently, hoping someone speaks. Because silence protects no one. But your voice might just save someone. If this story shook you, if it made you angry, sad, or stand up out of a chair, then don't let it end here. Backhand index pointing right, drop a comment with one word. Enough. If you believe we've stayed silent long enough, oncoming fist share this video with someone who needs to see what unchecked power can do and how courage can fight back. Speech balloon, have you ever dealt with your own HOA nightmare or been targeted for being different? Tell us in the comments. Your voice matters here. Bell subscribe to HOA Karen Shorts because we expose the truth one story at a time. Stop sign, and remember, silence protects no one. But your voice might save someone.